Hello there and welcome to World Panorama, your weekly roundup of the top stories from across the world. I'm TRACY SHILSHI and here are the headlines. The Netherlands stems populist wave as voters turn out en masse and back Prime Minister. Relief in EU capitals as Mark Rutte sees off far-right gate wielders as Freedom Party. The US's unpredictability pushes China and Saudi Arabia closer. King Salman visits Beijing, signs deals worth nearly $65 billion, asks China to play a bigger role in Middle East affairs. US President Donald Trump suffers another major setback. Federal judge in Hawaii and Maryland block his new travel ban. Trump vows to take the case as far as it needs to go, including the Supreme Court. And sirens blare and loudspeakers broadcast warnings in Japan's first civilian missile evacuation drill. More than 100 residents and school children of the coastal city of Oga participate in the exercise. Our top story, far-right populism in Europe failed its first test of 2017 when the nationalist firebrand Geert Wilders came a distant second in the closely watched Dutch elections. Conservative Prime Minister Mark Rutte claimed victory in The Hague on Wednesday night, bringing relief to many EU countries. The election was widely seen as a test of populist right-wing sentiment in Europe ahead of the French presidential vote in April and the German national election in September. Here's a report. A beaming Mark Rutte featuring on the front page of all Dutch papers on Thursday morning. The Prime Minister defeated a strong challenge by far-right rival Geert Wilders in key elections in the Netherlands, seen as a bellwether to populist support in Europe.
Want het land, Nederland, een enorm probleem in Nederland. Een enorme toestroom.
The Dutch elections had been billed as a litmus test for populism in Europe after last year's British vote to leave the European Union and the election of US President Donald Trump. With centre-right Prime Minister Mark Rutte's comfortable victory over anti-Islam and anti-EU Geert Wilders, there was relief from other EU governments facing a wave of nationalism. Wilders had pledged to close the borders to Muslim immigrants, shut mosques, ban sales of the Quran and leave the EU if he won the polls.
The Netherlands are our partners, friends, neighbours. Therefore, I was very happy that a high turnout led to a very pro-European result, a clear signal. And that after days in which the Netherlands had to tolerate accusations and reproaches from Turkey, which are totally unacceptable, and after days where we showed our solidarity.
Political analysts say Prime Minister Rutte, who for much of the campaign appeared to be behind Wilders, may have profited from the hard line he took in a diplomatic standoff with Turkey, refusing to allow two Turkish government ministers to address rallies in Rotterdam. Nevertheless, government formation will be a puzzle, with at least 4 parties having to bury the hatchet and compromise to form a government.
I'm a bit happy. I'm happy Geert Wilders hasn't become that big. I'm a bit sorry for the party of the Labour Party, the PvdA. But still, overall, it's an alright result, I think.
Well, I'm not surprised. I think Rutte is a good prime minister, so I'm not surprised that the people chose him again as president.
That's good for Europe. I'm happy it came out this way and that right-wingers didn't succeed once more. The voter participation was very high. Ultimately, I think people know when something is crucial, and so they made the right decision.
But the big winner of Wednesday's election was Green Left, the largest party of the Dutch left for the first time. Headed by 30-year-old Jesse Klaver, the party boosted its MPs from 4 to 14. It remains to be seen if Klaver will take his party into the next ruling coalition, which looks likely to be dominated by Rutte's VVD and other right-leaning parties. And although Wilders was defeated, politicians and experts say it does not signify the downfall of the far right in Europe. Both France and Germany have elections this year in which far-right candidates and parties are hoping to make quite an impact. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
All right, to talk us more about this story, we have KP Nair, consulting editor with the Telegraph, joining us in studio. Mr. Nair, thank you so much for being here. You know, Rutt's victory over the right-wing Wilders, it shows that anti-Muslim populism or that sentiment can be defeated and should be defeated. And that's the voice that we heard, at least in the Dutch elections. You got 81% of voting, and it's the highest percentage that the country has witnessed in the last 30 years. So that's quite a big verdict. You know, if you actually think about it in terms of how campaigning went when Wilders was actually considered to be more popular.
That is partly because the high turnout, I mean, that's partly because the Dutch elections, perhaps for the first time, had ramifications that go beyond the Dutch borders. As our report mentioned, there are two pivotal elections happening in Europe later this year.
Yes.
France and Germany. And if Geert Wilders had, his party had emerged as the largest single party, it would have given a shot in the arm to Marine Le Pen, and also xenophobic sentiment in Germany would have been strengthened. If that had happened, the significance for Europe and for the rest of the world of the Dutch outcome is that if that had happened, many things that we take for granted in Europe, in European societies, the edifice of tolerance and multiculturalism and inclusiveness and all that, that would have looked like rickety scaffolding. But that has been stemmed. That has not happened with the outcome of the Dutch elections. But all the same, the elections have been very significant in the long run, because the center has held, you see.
Yes.
I mean, Mark Rutte's party has held the center as the pivotal
that's right, since 2010, yes, he's been,
but the center has held after giving in all round to right-wing nationalism. That is the significance of this election.
All right. But then, you know, just talking back at how the campaigning went, a lot of us, of course, here in Asia, were not really paying that much attention to the Dutch elections. However, the EU, of course, was, because it was going to have significant ramifications, if at all. Like you say, Geert Wilders had in fact come to power because he was anti-Muslim, anti-EU, you know, and the other stance, of course, even more shocking as far as his statements are concerned. But there was an actual sense of anger on the street, which is quite, you know, unique in a sense, because you know, the Netherlands economically doing comparatively much better compared to the other EU countries. And, you know, that anger that is on the street is definitely something that is going to stay, irrespective of this victory. Do you agree?
Well, that is why I said that the center, right-wing center, center-right has held. But after giving in significantly to the right-wing nationalists.
Yes.
But you see, for Netherlands, this is not new.
Okay.
And it's a bit strange because Netherlands has never had its 9/11, God forbid. Actually, nothing bad has ever happened in Netherlands compared to France
and even in Germany.
Or Germany, nothing bad has
Italy
ever
as
happened.
well. Yes.
And yet, Netherlands has a history of this incipient right-wing nationalism. Many people may not remember now. There were in early 2000, there was a very colorful character, much more colorful than Geert Wilders, called Pim Fortuyn.
Okay.
He was also an intellectual, unlike Geert Wilders. And he managed to garner considerable support in Netherlands, and particularly in Rotterdam.
Okay.
He was eventually murdered. He was murdered not by Islamists, but he was murdered by an environmentalist.
All right. So what you're saying is that, you know, it has been in the making. It has been a sentiment that has always been there in the Netherlands. And this time around, we saw an even bigger version of it. But is there, you know, a lot of EU leaders, of course, are relieved with this verdict. But is there still a concern? Because like you've mentioned, Marine Le Pen, of course, is somebody who is also very openly anti-Muslim. And, you know, and the very fact that she's still going very strong. And of course, in Germany, we are seeing it as well. So what is the indication, at least for the EU? Can they breathe a sigh of relief, or is there still a lot of worry, at least on this front?
In the Netherlands itself, I think this right-wing nationalism that was reflected in the popularity of Geert Wilders, it will stay, because after Pim Fortuyn, for example, there was another filmmaker who was extreme right-wing Islamophobe by name Theo van Gogh. He was also murdered. He was also murdered, and you know, Holland is such a peaceful country that when two murders of political
nature happen,
activists happen, in a country where there's never been such murders, people don't forget, you know, people remember. And especially Theo van Gogh's murder. He was murdered by a hardline Islamist. So these things matter, you know. But you see, one forgets now that the countries from where these immigrants came, they are also to blame, you know, because initially when there was large-scale influx of immigrants into Holland after the Second World War, the people who came in, you know, they were told to learn Dutch. They tried to integrate. But these governments, you know, Moroccans, Tunisians and all, were very worried that if they integrated, the remittances would stop, they wouldn't send money. So these countries sent imams to preach to them, and you know, and it is these imams who played a role in creating this kind of radical Islam in the Netherlands. But at the end of the day, I think the values of the Dutch nation will survive.
Have held, at least
and
for
the results are very comforting, I think, for everyone, even for Asia, all over the world. I think it's very comforting.
We'll have to leave it there, Mr. Nayar. Thank you as always for joining us and talking to us about this big story. You know, we'll of course continue seeing you here on other stories as well. Meanwhile, let's head on with the other news, and that's of course Chinese President Xi Jinping welcoming Saudi King Salman to Beijing this week, as of course China pursued a charm offensive towards the Middle East, where it has previously kept a low profile. King Salman oversaw the signing of deals worth potentially $65 billion, giving further indications that the world's largest oil producer is looking to cement ties with the world's second largest economy. The king's three-day stay returned the favor after Xi last year visited Saudi Arabia as part of the first state visit to the Middle East by a Chinese leader in 7 years. The 81-year-old monarch reached Beijing with a massive reported entourage of 1,000 people, following stops in Japan, Malaysia and Indonesia as part of his month-long Asia tour. Analysts say that China is pivoting towards the Middle East and Saudi Arabia is strengthening its alliances in East Asia, as the United States' global diplomatic stance under President Donald Trump remains unclear. China depends on the volatile Middle East for oil supplies, but has long taken a backseat in its disputes. However, over the past year, Xi has taken a new approach, with steps that include hosting talks between the opposing parties in the Syrian conflict.
The MOU between the two governments on production capacity and investment cooperation involves 35 significant projects worth around $65 billion.
All right, with that, a quick break here, but still ahead, Donald Trump's travel ban plans suffer a major setback. Hawaii federal judge blacks the ban hours after it has to come into effect. The president calls it a case of judicial overreach. More on that in a bit.
Hello and welcome. I'm Amritansh Rai and you're watching Law of the Land.
The first claim has been given to the people who are working on that list.
Correct.
It makes actually sense to have more number of courts to deal with local specific issues.
Seafarer wages dues is also a maritime claim which has been provided highest priority.
Watch Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. US President Donald Trump took the first step to try to revive his travel ban against people from 6 predominantly Muslim countries. in fact alerting the appeals court in Richmond, Virginia, that he's challenging a Maryland judge's block of his executive order. The Maryland judge earlier this week put on hold Trump's 90-day ban on visas for people from the 6 nations, and a judge in Hawaii had also signed a broader ruling that blocked the 120-day hold on admitting refugees from all countries. Here's more from Hawaii.
A U.S. federal judge in Hawaii dealt another legal blow to President Donald Trump on Wednesday, issuing an emergency halt to his revised travel ban just hours before it was set to go into effect early on Thursday. U.S. District Judge Derek Watson put out an emergency stop on Trump's executive order, which aimed to temporarily bar entry to the United States of most refugees as well as travelers from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Watson said that the state of Hawaii showed a strong likelihood of success in its claims that the order violates the Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which prevents religious discrimination. Critics of the ban argued it was discriminatory against Muslims. Hawaii's Attorney General Doug Chin said his state had to make a stand against an executive order which discriminates against people based upon their nation of origin or based upon their religion.
We would love it if the federal government could make sure that they come out with an order that protects our national security interests, keeps the people of Hawaii safe, keeps the people of Oregon safe as well, but just not in a way that discriminates against people based upon their nation of origin or based upon their religion.
President Trump described the ruling as unprecedented judicial overreach. Trump said that the ruling makes the U.S. look weak and vowed to take the case as far as it needs to go, including to the U.S. Supreme Court.
This ruling makes us look weak, which, by the way, we no longer are, believe me. Just look at our borders. We're going to fight this terrible ruling. We're going to take our case as far as it needs to go, including all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Hawaii Governor David Ige and Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum welcomed the judge's order halting President Donald Trump's new travel ban.
We felt compelled to assure that we will not tolerate discrimination on the basis of national origin or religion, because that truly goes against the very essence of what makes Hawaii a very special place. And so certainly we felt compelled to file the lawsuit and are very happy that the court agreed with our position.
I think what we have heard today loud and clear, and it didn't take the judge very long to rule, is that when there is intent to discriminate, whether it's on the 4 corners of the document or whether you need to look outside to the context in which the document was prepared, an intent is an intent. You cannot snap your fingers and make intent to discriminate go away simply by substituting one document for another. And that is, in essence, what the court found today.
Trump's order would have placed a 90-day ban on people from 6 mainly Muslim nations and a 120-day ban on refugees. The president insists the move is to stop terrorists from entering the United States, but critics say it is discriminatory. An earlier version of the order issued in late January sparked confusion and protests and was blocked by a judge in Seattle. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Japan is preparing for any eventuality in the face of an increasing threat of a North Korean missile attack. It recently carried out an anti-missile drill in the town of Oga, which is the first in line to be hit if Pyongyang does send a missile. Meanwhile, the US has said that a new approach is needed in dealing with North Korea.
A siren sounding over the fishing town of Kitaura in Oga City, about 500 kilometers north of Tokyo. This is the nation's first civilian evacuation drill simulating a North Korean missile landing some 20 kilometers offshore into the Sea of Japan. A little over a week ago, North Korea had actually fired 4 ballistic missiles into the same waters, dropping one of them about 200 to 250 kilometers west of Oga. The largely rural Oga city has been Japan's front line against North Korea's missile threats since 1993, when Pyongyang began testing its 1,300-kilometer range Rodong missiles developed from Scud missiles with Soviet technology.
We in the government believe there is a need for the public to be educated on what to do when we receive information of a ballistic missile launch. So this drill is extremely worthwhile. We cannot anticipate the behavior of neighboring nations. I think it's very important to be prepared against any possible situation.
The drill comes soon after U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Thursday and suggested a new approach in dealing with North Korea.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the diplomatic and other efforts of the past 20 years to bring North Korea to a point of denuclearization have failed. So we have 20 years of failed approach.
America's proposal found resonance with China, which said it was open to proposals in dealing with Pyongyang. China has already proposed that North Korea should stop its nuclear and missile tests, and South Korea and the United States should stop joint military drills and seek talks instead. The country also said it is open to proposals as long as they are conducive to maintaining peace and stability. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And now let's get you a roundup of other international news in Global Watch.
Queen Elizabeth II has given the royal assent to the Brexit bill, clearing the way for Prime Minister Theresa May to start talks to leave the European Union. The bill was passed by MPs and peers on Monday and allows the PM to notify Brussels that the UK is leaving the EU with a 2-year process of exit negotiations to follow. May said she will trigger the process by the end of the month. North Korea will hold presidential elections on May 9th to replace impeached leader Park Geun-hye, who was dismissed on 10th of March over a corruption scandal. Prime Minister Han Kwan, who has also been acting president since December, has ruled out the running for president. Hwang had emerged in opinion polls as the top conservative leader, even though he never declared an intention to run. Pakistan is planning to declare the strategic Gilgit-Baltistan region as the 5th province, a move that may raise concerns in India as it borders the disputed Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. This was proposed by a committee headed by Foreign Affairs advisor Sartaj Aziz. However, India on Thursday said that Pakistan's proposal to declare the disputed Kashmir regions of Gilgit-Baltistan as 5th province was entirely unacceptable. North Korea says the recent incident involving the death of leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother was a plot by South Korea and the US to bring down the regime. Kim Jong-nam was poisoned in Kuala Lumpur in February. Malaysia's police chief said Interpol had issued a red notice, the closest to an international arrest warrant for 4 North Koreans wanted in connection with the murder of Kim Jong-nam. In a ruling on the contentious headscarf issue, European Union top court said the private employers may bar staff from wearing Islamic headscarves and other visible religious symbols under certain conditions. The Court of Justice found that a Belgian firm, which had a rule barring employees who dealt with customers from wearing visible religious and political symbols, a public image of neutrality may not be guilty of discrimination if it met certain other conditions.
And now let's shift gears and bring you up to speed with some sports news from across the globe in our segment Sports Action.
Lee Chong-wei of Malaysia lifted the men's singles crown at the All England Open Badminton Championship. In the final in Birmingham, the 34-year-old world number 1 defeated Shi Yuki of China in straight games 21-12, 21-10. For the Malaysian, it is his 5th singles title in 7 finals in the prestigious championships. Earlier, the Chinese pair of Lu Kai and Huang Yaqiong won the mixed doubles title by defeating the Malaysian duo of Peng Soon Chan and Liu Ying Gua in the final in 3 games, 18-21, 21-19, 21-16. The well-contested match lasted 1 hour and 26 minutes. Russian tennis champion Maria Sharapova's agent Max Eisenbud has stated that her 15-month suspension for failing a drug test is likely to extend her career all the way to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. It has been almost a year since Sharapova rocked the tennis world by announcing that she had tested positive for meldonium, an over-the-counter heart medication. She was then awarded a suspension which meant Sharapova couldn't play at the last Olympics in Rio in August. Sharapova said she hadn't realized the drug, which she had taken for more than a decade for various health issues, had been put on the 2016 prohibited list. Italian Serie A side Juventus defeated 10-man Porto 1-0 to enter the quarter-finals of the Champions League for only the second time in 4 years at the Juventus Stadium in Turin. Juventus, coming into the match with a 2-0 win in Portugal 3 weeks earlier, dominated the entire match, and there was no miraculous fight back from Porto as Maxi Pereira was sent off for a deliberate handball after 40 minutes. Paulo Dybala scored a low penalty in the 42nd minute of the game and ensured his side entered the last 8 with an aggregate 3-0 win over Porto. Massimiliano Allegri's side are joined in the quarter-finals by English champions Leicester City, who beat Sevilla 1-0 in Tuesday's other game. Midfielder N'Golo Kante scored a brilliant goal as the Premier League champions-elect Chelsea booked their place in the semi-finals of the FA Cup with a 1-0 home victory over Manchester United on Monday. Kante scored a superb goal in the 51st minute of the game as his low drive finally beat defiant United keeper David De Gea, who saved superbly from Hazard and Gary Cahill before the break to keep Mourinho's side in contention before Chelsea made the breakthrough. Chelsea, now unbeaten in their last 12 meetings with United, remain on course for the double in Conte's first season, being appointed as Mourinho's permanent successor. Retired West Indies batsman Shiv Narayan Chandrapal and his son Tagin Narayan have created history by achieving a unique feat of making 50s in the same first-class match. Batting for Guyana in the regional 4-day tournament at Sabina Park, Jamaica, Chandrapal brought up his 136th first-class half-century only hours after his 20-year-old son had also reached 50 on day 2 of the match. The 20-year-old opened for Guyana and gave a strong start to the team. He scored 58 runs, while Shiv Narayan, who came in later, scored 57 runs. It is for the first time that a father-son duo have notched half-centuries in the same first-class match since 1931.
And finally, the first Henna Hotel, which literally means strange hotel, opened in Nagasaki, southern Japan in 2015 and was recognized as the first robot-staffed hotel in the world by the Guinness World Records. Now a second such hotel opened in Tokyo this week. The media were invited ahead of customers to check out the 9 types of robots that help check guests in, clean the lobby and entertain the guests as well. We're leaving you with these interesting visuals. We'll see you next week again.